It's Mike over here, and today I'm talking about something that every person who tries to learn language will face. I'm talking about, is Duolingo any good? Because when you start learning any kind of language, you will Google around and people will recommend and people will also disencourage you from using Duolingo. So, what are my thoughts on that? Well, first of all, I can say I have studied Spanish, French, and Vietnamese with Duolingo. And then I know some people who have studied some other languages, and based on that is where my opinion comes. So I think if you speak a language like English or Spanish or French, and then you try to learn another Latin-based language, so you are French and you try to learn English, or you are English and you try to learn French, I think for those purposes Duolingo is good, because it's quite game-like. So I think especially for younger people, it is much more easy to keep up. Like, because with languages, I really believe you have to study and you have to do it every day. So if you do, like with Duolingo, it's much easier to realistically do it every day for years or something. Because with other methods, the problem is that you might not do it daily. Of course, like a personal tutoring is the best option, but is it available? That's the thing. Do you have time for it? Is it available? Like with Duolingo, if you have like an hour a day and you can dedicate it to that, then I think it is effective and you can learn another Latin-based language quite easily. Of course, like at the end you won't be fluent, but you have a good structure to actually start talking to people and to actually start reading articles and to actually start watching movies, listening to music. Because to me, that's the thing. You have to learn the basics and then you can expand. And like whatever you like for example, if you are in France, then of course you can start talking to people once you get the basics going, and you can go to the store and try to just function in French, and then based on your interest and based on your profession and based on all these things, you then independently you study specific vocabulary. For example, if you work in chemistry, then you learn chemistry based words, and not even chemistry based words, but like words related to the working environment. Or if you're studying there, then you learn more about like what you want to talk with other students. And if you listen to music and those things, then you learn those more of poetic words or like more slang type of words depending on what type of music. So to me, like, there's no problem. Like, of course people can say it's not perfect, but it is the best option. If you cannot get a private tutor, it is the best option. It is more effective than classes. And like for me, I have taken courses on Spanish and French, and both of them I managed quite well, even though especially with French, for some reason I wasn't very motivated. And actually Swedish too. I also did the same thing, not very motivated, but I study with Duolingo and I get enough to understand what's going on in the exam, so I can put something, and I can get a reasonable grade. So if I would want to go, for example, with Spanish or French, if I would want to go even deeper, Duolingo would be very good. Just do the Duolingo and at the same time do other things, and then you will start to realize that you understand more and more of those other things like the music and the movies and so on. But then the more of the challenging part of Duolingo comes when you take a language that is outside of that Latin spectrum. Like they have Chinese, they have Japanese, they have Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese is one I've been studying for many reasons, but the main reason is that I'm looking forward to working there, hopefully. But anyway, let's not go into that. But anyway, I want to learn that language. So there is not there is material, but there is not that much material, and the quality of material is not that amazing. Because for example, with like French and Spanish, these are popular languages to learn. Especially if you already handle English, then you can just get all this material and you have all these options, so you can argue that they are better than Duolingo or something. But with Vietnamese, like, there are different kinds of programs and there are like PDFs and everything, and I think I have to just say, like, the dumbest thing I've heard is people ask like, is the Vietnamese Duolingo any good? Like, no, these PDFs are better. But like, learning from a PDF and learning in this game-like way, it's different. and it's different for different people. Like for me, if I would have to study some freaking PDF all the time, it would be much harder for me to continue with that. But with Duolingo, it keeps you more motivated to going. And I don't even mean like I don't care about the owl, I don't care about the streak. Although I understand it can motivate some people, but what I do like is that it has like clear points, clear things you can do, and it's a game like you click, right, click, right, you know? It's more active, because with PDF you know, it might be good to learn how to learn with PDF like that, but I don't have time for all that. But so I will just go with the Duolingo. And of course, in this too, it's important to know people who already speak that language. Luckily, I know multiple people who speak that language, so if I have some questions, I can ask one person, and then after a while, I leave that person alone, and then I ask another person, you know, because you don't want to be bothering people all the time, especially, of course, those people already speak some language that I speak, so there is not really much of a helping I can do back, in that way at least. So you don't want to bother people, so you know, and you can get to know people online too, but I think it's the best if they are real life people. Even if you then end up speaking online, at least you know them in real life. So I think there is more of a motivation on both sides, and like you don't have to pay and all that. And of course, if you are in a place like Vietnam, I think, you know, hiring somebody might actually be a good idea. Like, I don't know, and they probably have, and they have places to learn, and that might work. But for me, like, I've always disliked the classroom environment for almost any kind of learning. It's not, you know, like, it needs to be one-on-one. It needs to be one-on-one, or if it's a very small group, it needs to be people of very similar level and very similar motivation. So I would find that mostly frustrating. So if I would ever pay somebody, it would be like tutoring, like one-on-one, like where I can ask questions, where I can get explanations, and then that would be like once a week or something, and then the rest of the week I study independently. Because there is a lot of things actually that, like, Duolingo, when you do on the desktop, it explains much more, but when you do on the phone, it doesn't explain that much. But like, to me, on the phone you just do the exercise, and then on the computer you can read more about it, and then you can also, I have downloaded some like packs of like PDFs and stuff, and those can be useful. But most of the time, if I have some question, you can ask a native speaker, and actually often they might find it interesting. I've noticed, like, especially Vietnamese, like, it is a very interesting language, and sometimes you don't think about your own language, so the native speakers can also get something out of it, because it makes them think. Because when you come from out of the box, totally out of the box when it comes to this language, and even more so in a language like Chinese, they might be interested in what you say, especially because it's although it is a large language, like, there is much less people learning that than Japanese, especially, or Chinese too. So they might be interested in that. Like, I know that if somebody would be learning Finnish, like, and they are not in Finland, that would be very interesting. Like, I would want to know why. That's an interesting discussion topic, and I would be more motivated to help them because they are studying Finnish, which is something like rare. But if they are studying like English or French, then it's, you know, it's common. So there is just this level of motivation thing. So that is a little bit of a benefit of learning a small language overall. But I think, like, Duolingo, it just helps so much, because like otherwise it would be difficult to get started. But even with the Vietnamese Duolingo, it's easy to get started. And it is in the northern dialect, as far as I understand, like, completely. But like, the pronunciation guide is not the best, because the pronunciations, they are just made by volunteers, and, you know, they are a little bit, you know, interesting sometimes. But that language, the pronunciation is difficult anyway, and it changes quite a lot depending, are you in the north, in the center, or in the south, and then there are even some more variables, but those are like the main categories. So to me, like, Duolingo, you learn how to write, you learn words, you learn how to write, and then the pronunciation you learn when you talk to the native people. Like, I think that's the only way, and for me, in that language, the pronunciation is the most difficult thing. And like, even with English, I think I'm doing okay. But even with English, like, if I would really have to like pronounce perfectly, it would be challenging. But the thing about English is that it is easier to pronounce. So once you reach that certain level, people understand what you're saying. But with languages like Vietnamese, the problem is that those sounds to us seem more similar because there is tonal and all those things. So the thing is, if you pronounce badly, they don't know what you're saying. They don't understand what you're saying. But like if they, and that's also a thing about the motivation, because some people, they might be able to understand if they really focus, but a normal person at the store or something, they're not gonna understand. So you have to perfect the pronunciation, and that is the biggest thing. But with Duolingo, if you already learn a lot of words and you learn how to write and you learn how to read, that's already a lot. So then pronunciation, you cannot learn, you have to learn it on the streets anyway. So I think Duolingo helps a lot with that. And then there is some things like, I know some people who have studied like Hindi in this one, which is even more like, because it even has, different alphabet and everything, so it's quite a distant language, even though the grammar is a little bit similar to Latin as far as I understand. But in that one there is like, and also if you Google you will find the same, is that like some words are a little bit rude, because of course in that language there is more of these honorary words, and in Vietnamese actually too. But the difference is that it seems like that in Hindi it's more sensitive, because in Vietnamese the thing is, if a native Vietnamese would speak the way you speak on the app, many of the times it would be offensive. But the thing is, if you are a foreigner, they understand what you are saying. Like for example in Vietnamese, people don't use that much like I and you. Instead they use some other ways of expressing that sentiment. So if a Vietnamese person goes around saying like I and you, it sounds very distant, very formal, and also can be considered rude, or like that they think they are better than you. But if a foreigner does that, they just know that like you are speaking in a simplified way, and then those things you will learn. It's to say, like in Japanese too, if you are polite, if you are humble, if you are modest, if you've like adapted their custom, when you communicate with them, they won't be so offended like what is the literal word that you say. But this can still be surprising, because in languages like English and Finnish, like you can talk pretty like badly and nobody's gonna be offended, like because we don't have, or at least we don't actively use like these honorary terms. Like you can just say like I and you, like the most simple, and they, you can just use it all the time and nobody's gonna be really like offended about that. It might not be the most polite, but they understand. And also there is a difference, because like in countries like Vietnam, there are foreigners, especially in the big cities, but there is less. And most of them don't speak Vietnamese at all, as far as I understand. So there is a different like attitude, because in the West, in every country, in Finland too, like in the cities, there are many people who are at like different levels of handling the language. So people are more tolerant and more used to that kind of attitude. And it's the same in like America. If you don't speak like perfect English, especially if you look like you are from abroad, well actually like I don't even know, like that might not even apply in America, because there are so many different Americans. But at least in Europe, if you are visibly not from there, most likely, and you speak the way that is not fluent, then they know that like you have started to learn it in your life, probably in your adult life. So they will be actually quite nice to you, because they know it's difficult to learn, especially in places like Finland and Russia too, where people recognize that the language is quite difficult. So they have respect if you try to speak it. And also in like Finland, Sweden, these places, most people speak English, especially young people. So if you try to speak their language, they like it in some way, because normally you could just speak in English and they would understand and you would get the things done. But when you are trying to speak in that language, you are showing more respect. Okay, I got off topic a little bit. I don't know how I'm gonna title this video, but anyway, overall I think Duolingo is a very good thing to get started, and at some point you are just gonna drop it when you are able to understand the product that you consume, or you are able to understand actually talking with people. And then, but even then you just have to keep it up. You have to keep talking, keep actively like reading articles, translating articles, so on. So if you made it this far, thank you for listening. I hope my rambling made some sense and offer some thoughts, or maybe entertainment even. So okay, see you guys.